pans out across the game. But we see here the prizes, and we speak about that Charizard straight away in the prizes.
Yeah, nothing too crazy on Bryan's side either. Well, actually, say either. On Bryan's side, just that Yveltal that he plays a 2 of in his list currently. So he's playing a very similar, if not identical list, other than what we already mentioned with that Stoutland coming in as well. But as we go into game 1 of our round 6 feature match, it looks like we're just kind of making sure, and we'll find out for you who's going to start shortly. But it's going to be really interesting. Yeah, Joe will be starting. Actually, we've got that dice on top of his deck. So it looks like he's won the coin flip there.
Maybe it's a mulligan there as well. I don't know. But
likely to have taken it by now, I think.
Yeah. Also, a big thing I just spotted in Joe's hand, he has that heavy ball.
Ooh.
So that Charizard, which we were worried about in the prizes, will be quickly attainable for Joe. And Charizard will be a key attacker in this, more towards the end of the game as prizes start being taken. Early on, it's about trying to disrupt and take out key attackers early on. Yeah,
and we mentioned those other attackers as well. When we talk about big attackers, we also talk about the Snorlax that Joe is going to be playing as well. Mentioned that big HP, hopefully kind of putting himself out of range of that Stoutland V, but also dealing 180 damage, which is massive when you think about the single prize decks and having to sometimes take 2 attacks to be able to take big KOs. So he's going to be, the typical LostBox deck, sequencing correctly with all of those flower selectings, all of the chorus experiments, before getting those attackers into action as soon as possible. And here we are, we're kicking things off. There's the draw. Oh, it's a mulligan and the draw. You were right.
There we go.
From Joe's side. So plenty of cards to work with here. And there's straight up with the heavy ball. Give himself some information.
Yeah, we need to check his prizes. I know Joe has taken notes on stream before. He likes to write them down.
Yeah, there is. There's a little life pad that we use. Again, we know Joe very well. He's there taking his notes, of course, making sure you're allowed to, of course, as long as it's legible for the judges to understand what you're note-taking for. So it's just confirming what his prizes are. He knows that Charizard's there, knows the Manaphy is there, which won't be really used in this matchup at all. But there it is, and the heavy ball goes straight into the prizes, shuffled up and placed back.
Yeah, the Manaphy only really useful in this matchup if you believe they're going to play a Raikou, and it could be one. I know Joe does a lot of analysis on the previous tournament, so he might actually know the kind of list that Bryan would tend to go for, because he might have checked out that list through looking at the previous week. So assuming he has a similar list, you'd know that it's more leaning in towards Yveltal route, which has got 2 Yveltal in the deck, and there's 2 hiding and 2 heat fire, so it's very much leaning towards being able to get as many Yveltals and Charizards out as possible.
Yeah.
So that could work well into the LostBox, but realistically they want to be going through that Stoutland route as soon as possible.
Yeah, interesting that Joe's, from that flower selecting, has opted to keep the fire energy. He plays the heavier line of fire energies in his list, the 3 copies, and has seen his prizes, knowing that he hasn't prized any either. Does use the poker stop to check the first top 3 cards and finds 2 items there, beginning with that Fog Crystal, grabbing another Comfey out, and just starting to get going, I think.
Yeah, I'm just counting up the items. I think it's around 20 to 25. I lost count as I was getting through them, but a huge amount of items in the list, and a lot of stuff that you can get back with. Clara's, one of the Claras is gone, but it is possible to get back in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely so. And I'm sure Joe would have been looking for those battle VIP passes. We know how vital that card is. There's the scoop up net. Going into the second Comfey now, there's 2 switch cards essentially. The switch card and another scoop up net. So can keep going for this current turn. Just as, he's eyeing up some of his cards there, just make sure he's sequencing correctly. As we've mentioned on our previous games, it's a really hard deck to make sure you're doing all the right intricate moves at the right time and in the right order.
Especially as a deck that can take some time to get to your win condition, so you have to play it fast whilst also playing it smart. And you see there that fire energy you mentioned about the first one being taken to hand, just thinking that 1 Clara in the Lost Zone is better than starting a fire in there, because then it makes it the future energy choices much tougher, whereas by conserving those early energy choices, it makes future flower selectings more easy.
Yeah, definitely. And this is going into now the 4th flower selecting, so there will be 4 now going into the Lost Zone. I think another quite interesting decision there. Joe just double checking his prizes. The Snorlax is going, knowing he needs to keep one of his choice belts, so he has 2 in his deck to be able to sort of reach those heavy or high HP Pokemon, especially with the Charizard.
Well, the thing is, he's got 2 Snorlax, he's got 2 Choice Belt, but he can get the Snorlax back after using it. So if he gets rid of one of those, it's not as deadly. But this is starting to get to that stage where Mirage Gate is going to be a potential option on turn 2. And that's where you might be able to get an early Snorlax knockout, for example, on a Lugia using Zigzagoon's Headbutt Tantrum alongside the Choice Belt Snorlax attack. So there is a potential high roll option here for Joe if he gets the Mirage Gate active.
Yeah, just double checking his list. I'm kind of going through again because Joe plays the Twin Energies and Raihan. He doesn't. He's chosen to opt against the Mirage Gate play. So he's actually playing the Raihans. He's playing the Twin Energies. So there's multiple ways to get energy out of the discard alongside the Clara as well. So that's the way how Joe will be looking to utilize that Snorlax as well. So, not having 4 or 3 Mirage Gates in this list opens up additional space.
And while you're checking that out, that's just an attached pass on the side of Bryan. So, does mean that Joe keeps his Lost Zone going up. He's now up to 7, which, again, isn't relevant here because he's not playing a Mirage Gate. Something I think most people would have assumed. I just assumed. I didn't even check.
Yeah.
But respect to Joe for seeing the value through the Twin Energy route, and that's where we're going to start seeing. I mean, when you get that Cramorant attack early, that gives you that 1 attachment that you can do, and then it's only 2 attachments to get that full damage output from the Snorlax.
Yeah, it looks like he's just activating Poke. Oh no, he's just making sure it's in play and not part of the Lost Zone cards there. There's a switch card into the other comp phase now, so he's just continuing to just kind of burn through his deck, Lost Zoning the right cards, that Galarian Zigzagoon utilized as with that Headbutt Tantrum to kind of increase the damage outputs where necessary. Lots of cards in Joe's hand, which is great to see. And there's the pivot as well option. There's the Twin Energy, one of them going straight onto the Charizard. Again, typically we see with that Charizard ability, the Excited Heart, where it costs less energy to be able to attack after your opponent takes prizes, but being able to play extra cards which sort of boost the energy attachments like the Twin Energies or Magma Basins, you can actually get attacks off far earlier and get multiple uses out of it.
Technically, next turn he could attack with that Charizard despite no prizes being taken because he could get Twin Energy again on it and then Magma Basin and a Fire on. So there is a route to attacking with Charizard with no additional value from the Excited Heart. But at this stage, we do see Archeops in the discard pile for Bryan, so he was able to get those in the discard pile. We also see a Lugia VStar in his hand, so he will be able to get the VStar off and using the Summoning Star. So the kind of ideal first turn from Bryan is there, but there is concern about the hand having options outside of that.
Yeah, there's a few options that he just is going to be looking for here. Just draw into that Aurora energy, typically used to try and find a way to into some of those Archeops into the discard. Does get a Quick Ball, does have access to things, of course, like the Luminion and the Crobat, and of course the Stoutland at some stage. But there's the Lugia V-Star coming down. He's not going to be looking to use many more Lugias here. It's just going to be sort of utilizing it for its Summoning Star ability. Does play down that Quick Ball. Of course, has taken some damage already. So Joe has started applying pressure from that Cramorant, being able to attack Spit Innocently for very little, if not any energy because of that ability that it has with 8 in the Lost Zone. But here we are, just looking to see what support. It looks like a Marnie was sort of grabbed out of the deck right now, looking to maybe just disrupt Joe. Joe has plenty of cards in that hand. Mentioned it already. But of course, just waiting to see when Bryan plays it, of course. One of those key things that you have to make sure, because players, obviously, he's put it on top of his hand. Both these players very well seasoned as well. Making sure that, he's got to sequence correctly first before playing it down. That's
why you play the 2 Luminion, is to guarantee the access to it, because it's so vital on those turns, using your Ball Search to find a Luminion and bring it into play. And this is where that Marnie can be used to disrupt. It works very well against LostBox. LostBox looking to accumulate cards in the hand through all of those flower selectings and chorus experiments. So Marnies will set them back to square one with that 4-card hand. But a big part of the Marnie is there was a lot of energy in Bryan's hand. So being able to put them back into the deck to activate the Archeops later will be key. And so what I would say is the kind of the process right now for Bryan, that Pokestop got him into a position where he can attack, but he's still playing in a very uncomfortable position overall, and actually only able to get one Archeops into play from that Summoning Star.
Yeah, it's not great value, and I think that I might have been slightly incorrect there. I might have called out to Luminium V's.
Yeah, it's
actually just the one, which is still a great utility to be able to use the ability and also attack and sort of reserve or preserve energies there. But yeah, this is not the best
it's the debate
value
at the moment, isn't it? One fish or two fish.
It is. We saw it from LAIC where Lucas was playing double Luminion, wasn't he? And Tord played the one there. So we're just getting those attachments out. So it's not great value. There's the Lugia, and also discarding the Stadium as well with that Tempest dive, over KOing the Cramorant, of course. But now Joe in a position where he can try and retaliate where he can. The Charizard, unfortunately, with Joe prizing the other Twin Energy, makes it a little bit more awkward to be able to try and utilize that attack immediately. Does require 1 fire and 4 colorless energies. Now currently only needing 1 fire and 3 colorless energies. So maybe a right-hand play could work here as an option to use Combustion Blast with a Choice Belt. Has a Choice Belt. Doesn't need it because it's already damaged, but has the Choice Belt in hand for any fresh Lugias later as well. So many options, and that's what Joe's got to figure this out right now.
Yeah, and there's also that Snorlax that could come in and finish off the Lugia too. So you've got lots of different options to hit big, and that is part of Joe's list of having Charizard, having Snorlax as big hitters. There is a Drapion in there, which he'll be hoping at some point will come up in a flower selecting, so he can just completely remove it from play. We saw earlier the LostBox on stream from Robin didn't have the Drapion. In fact, there it is,
just as you called it. Fantastic foresight you have there, Mike, to be able to instantly see the Drapion V go to the Lost Zone as Joe goes up to the 9 count. So just one away from also trying to utilize the Sableye if he needs to as well. Bryan just a little bit on the back foot, I think, here. But I think Joe's just kind of mulling over his options in terms of how could he get an attack off, how can he apply enough pressure. He does need to go into this other comfy to push him up to 12, 10 Lost Zone cards as well.
Activating that Sableye. Sableye right now wouldn't do enough damage to the Lugia, so really wants to try and find a way to get Charizard or Snorlax to attack, but after that Marnie, I think it's going to be challenging here for Joe. As this is pretty much the dream Lost Zone number at this stage of the game. You'd very much hope to get to this level, and it's going to be an escape rope here. So that's going to put the Luminion into the active spot. So the Charizard there now. This could be interesting because
there's the Raihan. As we mentioned earlier, there's the extra Fire Energy attachment. We'll just need to get a hand attachment now of an energy to be able to pull off an attack. Just double checking his energies there. Grabs the other fire. We're going to see all 3 fires on his board, somewhere on his board now. But yeah, just kind of confirming he's going to be taking out this Luminion. A nice, easy 2 prizes to take, whilst that Lugia still damaged and still stays on the board.
There's a lot of talk about Radiant Charizard potentially being good enough just on its own with Inteleon again. And see whether that would come back to add so much value to it to try and get it to attack as much as possible. What Joe has done here is he's created a list that encourages you to attack with Charizard as often as possible and does get it there with that Raihan. As you mentioned, no Mirage Gate, using the Raihan as a counter knockout strategy. It also allows you to find any card you want from your deck, which is incredibly powerful ability. We've seen that with the
Forest Sealstone.
Forest Sealstone. It's essentially a Forest Sealstone and an attachment.
Yeah, it's an incredible card, and lots of utility comeback cards, which is great to see. And now we're just putting himself in such a great position after that Combustion Blast to knock out that Luminion. Of course, can't attack next turn without finding another opportunity to switch out of it.
But they get that Twin Energy off the prizes, so that's key.
So it's just going to be finding ways to utilize other attackers. There's that Snorlax also on the bench waiting that can, as you mentioned, could come up and sort of take out the Lugia VStar here as well. But here's the Stoutland coming onto the bench by Bryan. And now we do see the Archeops looking to power that up. There's the first powerful energy. There's the capture energy. So he's just kind of now getting it ready to, take a lot of prizes quickly.
Well, I mean, Stoutland's a great attacker to attack into the Comphase and the Sableye, but Charizard is too bulky. So Snorlax, they've both got too many hit points. 160 on Charizard. is it 150 on the Snorlax?
Yep, you're correct.
So those two guys are not going to be in range of Stoutland. And this is now where Lugia is going to be sat there in the active, a potential threat there, and we see some deck thinning on the other side from Bryan. One of the advantages of really pushing into that Archeops search line is that later on into the game you can just use it as deck thinning once you've got everything out that you need, so it can make that consistency towards the end game of Lugia very good.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where obviously he hasn't got the value there out of getting both the Archeops out using Summoning Star, but he's still able to get, he's got 2 attackers out right now. He's still on top of the 2 energy cards that you pull out of the deck to attach to your Pokemon. You still have your hand attachments. You can kind of build enough attackers via that route as well.
And that's why you had to get the Stoutland out early to start building that up. Otherwise, it would have been too hard to get it fully powered up potentially in one turn. But there's going to be a knockout from Lugia onto the Charizard. It will go into the discard pile. The dream spot for the Charizard, historically, for the LostBox, to be able to Clara it back in later on.
Yep.
So that's going to be waiting there patiently for later on, as Joe now has to work out a way to get rid of this Lugia, which again is not an easy task because he does need to find a way to get 3 energy onto the Snorlax.
Just has it in hand, straight into the Raihan, fire energy onto the Snorlax, has the twin energy in hand, going to be dealing 180 minimum with that thumping Snore. Does put itself to sleep with a pretty unique card text with it as well, having to then flip 2 heads to be able to get out of it. But of course, with LostBox, with so many different switching outs and different ways to kind of maneuver around the deck, it doesn't really matter as much. And plus, typically with single prizes, you expect them to go down.
Yeah, and that's the advantage with these after your, if Pokemon's been knocked out in your previous turn cards, like Raihan, is they're great in single prize decks because you expect every turn for a Pokemon to go down. So Raihan most commonly is going to be active, and we see a Pal Pad there, which is going to be kept, and that's going to allow to put those Raihan back in to be able to activate them later on potentially. The options now for Joe definitely increasing as, at that point, 2 Raihan being used, you think, well, that's them gone.
Yeah, and then we'll also see double escape rope in hand as well. So even if his Snorlax does go to sleep and doesn't get knocked out, it can just come straight back. So already has the air balloon on one of his Comfeys. So has that free retreat pivot already. And here comes the Snorlax being able to thumping Snore. And I think, Bryan has seen that this is unwinnable from this stage. Of course, only being able to take 1 breed where possible. But yeah, both these players now just setting up for game 2 of our round 6 feature match here as we look at the prizes from both sides of the board. Again, I don't think nothing too crazy either side.
Maybe the Snorlax, if an early Snorlax gets put into the Lost Zone, similarly to how it did in the first game.
And
attach pass again. But there is stuff in hand.
Yeah, so Bryan's, I think, quite okay with this scenario. He's got multiple energies in hand, which isn't always ideal. But has, I believe, a Crobat, has his own Radiant Charizard as well, utilizing a lot of these heat energies and different auroras. But in theory, this is all he really needs turn 1. He just wants that Lugia so he can evolve and eventually use Summoning Star.
And so we see that Snorlax going to be going into the discard pile. So that's going to be checked by Joe here. And that means that he's going to think, I've got a heavy baller out of my prizes, or I've got to use some kind of ordinary rod. Has he got ordinary rod in there?
No,
he's got the Clara, the 2 Clara.
Clara, yeah.
So that's the only way to get it back out of the discard pile. So that's why that first decision to try and check your deck is so important in LostBox, because often you can play your first few flower selectings without ever getting a chance to check what's in the deck.
Yeah, and that's why it's often vital for some of the decks that we see when they go through their first deck search. It can sometimes take a little bit longer. It's a little bit of a grace period from your opponents when you play through the game, because this is your first time seeing what's in your deck, what's prized. Joe obviously taking notes as well, making sure it's a fresh new page every time. It just clears, and then he just writes in the prizes for this game so that he knows what to kind of go for, if there's any pieces of the puzzle that he needs for his combos. So here we go. It is the first flower selecting of game 2.
Oh, it's an important one.
Ooh, that's Raihan. Is that a battle VIP pass?
It is. So the first Raihan scene is going to have to go into the Lost Zone, which was so key to last game. But as we mentioned, there are 2 of them in the deck. We saw 2 of them last game. There's the Pal Pad to be able to increase the number of uses. But the VIP pass just too key at this early stage to start getting those Comfeys down. And in particular, try and get to that Lost Zone count of 4 to activate the Spit Innocently from the Cramorant using Lost Provisions ability.
Yeah, exactly. That Cramorant putting in work, even though it was just a 1 attack in game 1, but applying enough pressure to be able to allow 2-hit KOs onto a Pokemon, onto VStar Pokemon, in effect, alongside the Charizard or the Snorlax itself. And there's another flower selected there. I think it looks like a Fog Crystal going into the Lost Zone. So that's 2 already, alongside a Pokestop. Hasn't found a Chorus yet, because that's his way of getting into 4 Lost Zone cards the quickest way.
So there, I think he would have checked his hand to go whether the Fog Crystal was worth it or not. Because that if he could have got another Confe out with the Fog Crystal, maybe he had a switch out, but he checked his hand, didn't have that. So he knew he had to high roll with the Pokestop to try and get more things, maybe a switch out and a Ball Search.
There's a Clara coming down. Looks to target the... Ooh, yeah, just kind of picking back up that Snorlax, knowing he's not got access to another one right now. But just kind of utilizing and now knowing where his cards are. Setting up his board for now. Just attaching the Psychic Energy to the Snorlax. There's a Primate Wisdom from the Rangaroo. Obviously has played the sport, so can't Cold Rest, won't be able to attack this turn. So Joe will be playing a bit of a slower turn 1 right now, whereas he was popping off without even using Chorus to get to 4 in game 1. So just a pass back over to Bryan now.
Yeah, and I think that was the least chosen option there, probably for his second turn there, to use a Clara. You know, you rarely see a Clara use this early on in a game, but as he quite rightfully did there, putting that Snorlax down with the energy on, at least it opened up that potential for future big damage, especially puts a threat on the board against something like a Stoutland, and it puts, and with the Zigzagoon as well, it does put an unevolved Lugia in range, so there's lots of things it brings into the game, because at that point he knew there was no chance to reach for the Spit Innocently there, so...
Yeah,
I get that was kind of this is what my cards have chosen I'm going to do this turn. I don't really have much choice at this point.
No, and I think he won't be too upset with that, because he'll probably be thinking, as you mentioned, he might have seen Bryan's list from AIC before, and there's a Marnie just coming down as we saw the Lugia V-Star come out to play as well. But, you know, with a lot of these decks, they start to flip-flop between Boss's Orders and the Serena, and Serena not being able to gust up any of these single prize attackers means that Snorlax is likely to sort of sit there quite pretty for a little bit longer. So just having an energy attachment there, and just if he's able to draw into a twin energy, can just start applying a lot of damage quite quickly as well. But there's the Marnie, of course, we see. I think that was the Aurora, and there comes another Lugia as well. I don't think Bryan's in the best spot, unfortunately.
He's not able to find those Archeops. I think that's the big trouble. He's getting rid of a lot of energy in this search process, and realistically he wants to be getting the Archeops down.
So he's having to get the Crobat out right now, because he's already attached for turn already to the other hiding energy, it looks like.
And Supporter down already.
Yep, so, and that means he won't be able to attach an Aurora to be able to get maybe an Archeops that was in the hand into the discard.
Only for 3.
So a few options. Oh, there's a Quick Ball, Evo Incense. Oh, hello.
Okay.
That's something. It's possible. Oh, he can get at least 1 there, just from what I can see with the cards there. That's the Quick Ball to get rid of that Archeops. But it's only 1 again, and that's the trouble.
Yeah, well, you can get an attack off this turn, but we saw last game how much it affected his routing. He had to start putting stuff down a turn earlier to start powering it up and guarantee it. And he's actually going to be passing there.
This is the worry as well, because he's now benched a second Lugia and also the Crobat. Joe's currently licking his lips, thinking, there's all my 2 prizes that I need to take out.
He got his turn back as well, because it felt like he missed last turn a little bit, and so by that pass there he got his turn back. And one thing to note as well is that Archeops in hand could have been removed with the Quick Ball, but realistically there's no disruption normally in LostBox, because they're always looking to get their hand so big, so it's unlikely to see a Marnie or a Judge or anything like that. So just knew he could hold on to that hand and definitely play it out next turn. It can be very easy when you see search cards, and especially with the Archeops, to think, I just got to get it in the discard. But by holding on to that, Joe is now thinking, oh, there's no Archeops in the discard. I could play a bit safer maybe.
I was about to say a really interesting play here for... actually, the Lugia has 210 HP, which is just a little bit out of range. Does have the Zigzagoon as well somewhere
220,
in there.
Yeah. Zigzagoon.
I was thinking if he was able to play the Escape Rope and find a twin and a choice, there's an opportunity there to take the first 2 prizes of this game.
There was that twin that went through the Pokestop. So that's
so that was 1 gone. So the likelihood wasn't there, but it was a possibility to maybe see Joe take early prizes here, but he's got multiple sort of switching outs and options here. Even if he's the one to first start applying pressure, I think that's absolutely fine as well.
Yeah, we just saw that the flower select in there, scoop up net or pal pad.
Yep.
We mentioned the early Raihan, how key it is to keep the second Raihan and pal pad it back into the deck. So that pal pad more important than scoop up net, which is one of the most valuable switch outs you can have, resetting abilities, and can be used for the Zigzagoon as well.
There's a second escape rope go
Okay.
of the 3 in his. Yeah, so different lines of play that are available to him. Which is kind of key in this matchup. So, like I said, applying pressure is so important. You just want to make sure you can find a way out of range of a Stoutland play as well. There's the choice belt that I was imagining. Of course, there's a Cramorant go because there's already one on the bench. Typically, you only really need to use the one there. Bryan's stage, he's probably also keeping that quick ball because he might have access to the Luminion V so that he can then find a way to get both the Archeops out. Next turn and then start swinging away as well. So both players just not, they're not rushing their decisions right now. They're not sort of over-committing to plays which kind of put them in a sort of awkward spots. And there's just an attachment there, just going to be applying pressure with this Spit Innocently.
Yeah, and it was so key last game to put the Lugia VStar in range. It's actually going to be putting the choice belt on as well, which makes it within range of a 2-hit knockout from the Spit Innocently. That choice belt now, we said there's 2 of them in the list. So in order to get the choice belt onto the Snorlax for the knockout on the Stoutland, that's going to make it a little bit more out of range. So this is quite a good turn right now for Bryan to get the Stoutland down, if possible, off the back of this Quick Ball and Archeops, if he feels confident enough that he can get it.
Yeah, I think Bryan will be looking, because what Joe's done is apply 2 different attackers on the board. So he's got Snorlax with 2 energies ready to start swinging for heavy damage anyway. But also with that Cramorant being able to 2-hit KO, because of this scenario, it means that Bryan has to maybe try and take out one, maybe Lost Vacuum the other choice belt. There's a couple of options there. As we can see, prioritizing that Stoutland as well, that goes straight to the bench. Yeah, and now we're about to see a Serena to discard some of the Archeops pieces again.
Yeah, my thought process here is if that choice belt goes down with the Cramorant off of, say, a Stoutland hit here, then that is going to make it much tougher for that Snorlax return knockout. But, there is another choice belt in there somewhere, but it just means there's a little bit more to search out. But then equally, the Raihan will guarantee the search out if he gets access to Raihan.
For either the Snorlax or maybe even the Charizard itself, because if Bryan takes 2 prizes, the Charizard only then needs 1 fire and double colorless.
Oh, there's another choice belt in his hand, actually. I think I saw just at the edge there.
A little glimpse of it, have you?
A little glimpse, yeah.
Oh, it's a little shake of the head. But there comes the super powerful energies, all attached to the Stoutland. So with the base 40 plus another 80 damage in combination with those energies attached, that double dip Fangs will be dealing 120 damage. Perfect math. Well, just over, really. Was that a Lost Vacuum as well?
On the air balloon,
yeah, okay. And here, Bryan will be taking 2 prizes and activating the prize race. And Joe, a little chuckle, knowing that now he's just staring down at this very annoying Stoutland, which is able to kind of help Bryan prize race this kind of single prize attackers.
There it is. The choice belt.
So it'll be interesting see how Joe can maneuver this turn. Because, of course...
easy decision.
Yeah, well, not the funnest card to have in your hand. But, but yeah, very easy. Double battle VIP pass there. There's the Primate Wisdom. Is he putting it back to the top so he can get rid of the other one as well?
I assume that's the strategy here. And
he's got multiple switch outs in his hand, so I think there was another switch card there.
Is he just looking for energy at this point? I didn't see an energy in his hand. So maybe that's what he's... Oh, no, he does have a Psychic there.
So he has the out to KO this. He's also going to want to start maybe developing his Charizard at some stage as well. Start finding it and putting it in a place where he knows he can access it. Or things like that, type of cards that he could do. So he's, just picking a number of different options. Plays the Chorus Experiment. Again, interesting direction and sort of sequencing. There's the Charizard with another Fire Energy. And I think the Raihan as well.
Yeah, so Sableye there and the Heavy Ball going into the Lost Zone. So the Heavy Ball not needed here because there's the Snorlax that's in the prizes and the Sableye that's in the prizes. He's hoping will come across naturally through finding them, and he knows there's the Charizard available for future attacks. So at this stage, Joe is sitting in a very strong position to get this knockout in the Stoutland, but it is always then, what's the one prize strategy on Bryan's side? Is that going to be viable? Because that Lugia is just going to sit on the bench and hopefully, from his point of view, not come up again as a target.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's going to be looking to try and find a way into his single prizes himself. You know, his own Charizard where possible, using his own Archeops to attack as well, sort of generally dealing enough damage, although without access to things like the powerful energy. You know, the Archeops is only doing 120 with that Speed Wing, which doesn't happen to be enough for a lot of the attacks.
And there is that potential for the collapse stadium healing approach of removing if you've got 5 on the bench and you collapse stadium, then you're able to take it out of play, and that's going to be Snorlax is still awake, and this is definitely one of the best flowing Lost Boxes we've seen today. Just everything going in favour of the Lost Box user. So Joe definitely riding his luck a little bit here, where on the other side, Bryan has definitely had a bit slower game plan than we typically see of a Lugia VStar.
Yeah, 100%. We saw that Astral Misfortune not pay off for Benji in the last round with the double dice roll, but there Joe just instantly going with the double heads and waking up his Snorlax, not even having to find a way to retreat it if it survives an attack, of course. But it looks like he's used one of his Archeops ability already, that Primal Turbo, to kind of turbo and accelerate energies onto that active Lugia V-Star right now. So we'll be looking to KO this Snorlax, kind of removing, again, another Choice Belt threat, of course. Identifying also, Joe has too many cards in his hand, so that Marnie is there, plays it down, both players shuffling and putting it to the bottom of the deck. So we'll be here now to see what Bryan was able to do as future attackers. This is one thing we mentioned a couple of times already, the other ways to power up that Charizard. Bryan hasn't seen the Magma Basin yet being able to be played, and then once during each player's turn, a player may attach a Fire Energy card from the discard pile to one of their bench fire Pokemon. So again, this is where Joe's leaning into that Charizard to be able to kind of constantly come back and deal big, heavy damage.
And we saw Joe's hand off the Marnie there, and that was a fantastic looking hand out of a Marnie. And that's the advantage you got with this deck, is you thin out a lot of cards that you don't want. Like we see all the Battle VIP passes just instantly removed from the hand here. But a big Lugia V-Star on the other side made that attack, is going to be sitting there in the active. So it's not only about knocking out the Lugia V-Star, but, you know, thinking about future turns. And we've mentioned the Collapse Stadium as a way to remove damage counters potentially. But Lugia V-Star itself is only just about within range of that Charizard if all of the pieces are found.
I think the Choice Belts are both gone, right? If I recall correctly, that Snorlax has already lost one. There might be one already gone.
Yeah, there was one on the Cramorant and then
and the Snorlax.
The Snorlax, so no Choice Belts available.
No, but at the same time, we're talking about a Collapse again. He's only going to be able to get rid of one of those sort of more squishy Pokemon on Bryan's bench right now, either the damaged Lugia V-Star or the Crobat. But at the same time, Joe could also look to just apply a lot of damage and then try and sweep with the Sableye as well, with Lost Mine.
One in the prizes, one in the Lost Zone.
Oh, well,
so,
okay.
The options are starting to thin out a little bit here. And this is where the challenge comes with the decisions you make. You mentioned the Charizard being such a good attacker in this version that Joe's got. It does do a lot of damage, and you know, putting 250 damage on a Lugia V-Star is great in Lost Box to be able to finish off. But all of the options, the triple headbutt tantrum from the Zigzagoon's gone. The Choice Belts are all gone, so just out of range now, the Lugia. So really, the Gust would have been the dream scenario here, and it's
just activating the Magma Basin there. So it takes 2 damage, but you know, so the free attachment, free acceleration to that Charizard, and we'll just need 1 hand attachment to be able to attack from here on. There's a Primate Wisdom as well from Oranguru, just again kind of going through his deck. I mean, I think the deck's actually quite thin as well from Joe's side.
Is there a Serena put back in earlier with the Power Pad maybe, or is it still in the discard pile? Because that's the only Gust available.
I believe he may have already played a Colress as well, so may just have to look at attacking into this Lugia for now. Just again, it's all about just applying pressure. Again, thinking about with a Collapse Stadium, they won't be able to get rid of 2 of those V Pokemon. So
one's still in range.
Yeah, well there you go, exactly. So now they're both in a position where they're just heavily damaged, and it's back over to Bryan. So Joe will need to kind of utilize his resources from here on out with those Claras. We know there was one in the discard pile because he had to use it really early. And of course, with things like Pad being able to put them back into the deck, he's going to have to find a way to kind of recycle those Charizards where possible, whilst Bryan's going to be looking to try and limit, of course, with that collapsed stadium where he can, but also start trying to think about how he could use his single prize attackers like that Charizard of his own on his bench.
Yeah, energy is a big factor now as well, because we've seen some retreats happen, some early energy discard as well, and that's what Joe will be doing there, checking through the discard pile. Because if this Lugia VStar in the active goes to the bench for a retreat, and then the collapsed stadium approach happens, we then start questioning where is this energy coming from. You know, there's the Charizard that's got the potential to attack, but it's going to need a little bit more energy than that at this stage.
There's a research, giving Bryan a fresh 7 cards. Bryan playing sort of, I guess, more on a slightly heavier energy count, based on sort of the list that he's playing, because he's playing that double Yveltal and the Radiant Charizard, all sometimes needing quite heavy energy cost to be able to attack. So let's see what Bryan's able to do from this position. Does Evo Incense just to kind of check what's remaining in his deck as well. Did research before using Primal Turbo to be able to kind of not necessarily waste energy getting out the deck first, maybe just drawing into it. Does just Tempest Dive.
I think that's a big factor right now, is how much energy is left. So 2 prizes remaining here for Bryan. Does have a very damaged Lugia in the active spot, which will be a fairly simple knockout for the LostBox, we'd assume. One of the Cramorant was in the lost zone, one in the discard, the Charizard in the discard. There's a Snorlax in the Sableye, both in the prizes. So a lot of, I don't think there's any of the main attackers left in deck.
Maybe not in deck, so he will need to again sort of think about how he's going to get those cards out of the discard, because he will need to take the knockout here. There's the Clara that is just eyeing up. We'll be looking to have to use his Pad. Does obviously have a big hand as well. This Lugia only having 30 HP left, don't forget. But of course, his attackers right now I think are quite limited and available to him. So let's see how Joe plays this out. He's going to have to take a knockout here and then have to take a knockout on his next turn as well. There's the Pad, which is key.
Doesn't want to hit anything else. That's when someone puts 1 back in with that Pad, you really know that they don't want anything else. They only want that card right there.
Yeah, so this is kind of vital here. I don't know how many cards are remaining in Joe's deck, but there's a Flower selecting, takes the top 2.
Is that Clara or Clara?
Oh, yeah, that's a double Clara. But his turn here, he has to try and set up multiple attackers. So his maybe a Sableye and Charizard. But he goes for the Cram.
So it's going to be Cram this turn, Charizard the next turn, most likely.
And he's going to have to find this arena to be able to do so at some stage as well. I think he's just double checking whether he puts another energy in hand or not, because he wants to maximize his percentages and outs here. So of course has that free pivot. There goes the Cram. It's just kind of, I think you don't really want to be putting Charizard down.
So is that Serena in his hand then?
Yeah,
it must be. There it is.
Well.
So at this point, the deck is so thin, he's only got the cards he could possibly want.
And with 1 card left in deck, so he just, Bryan's going to be thinking, I need to some way disrupt this, because he's not going to bench that Charizard until he's ready to attack with it. It's sometimes very much a key decision that you have to sometimes make. There's the Cram, Spit Innocently knockout. And here, Bryan has to take still has to take 2 more prizes, or only just give up the 1 with the Charizard. But Joe's going to have that Serena in hand, that one-off copy that he plays to gust up either the Crobat V or that already damaged Lugia.
Yeah, and so that means the collapsed stadium at this stage won't remove all the potential targets. The only option now is, I guess it's the knockout into Marnie or something, but even then it's the deck's so thin, there's only 1 card in the deck, so most of what will be drawn will be the hand available to Joe. So options very thin now for Bryan, and he'll be looking back on that turn where he couldn't quite get the Archeops down, and that will be the pivot turn, because that is the key with Lugia, isn't it? You have a rhythm that you have to hit, and anything short of that you open up the potential for the opponents, and right now the Lugia VStar deck just 1 turn behind, it feels, as there was too many Vs in play, so all of them accessible for the LostBox to knock out, and Joe's LostBox specifically aiming to knock out Vs with those Snorlax and Charizard cards included. And
there's the boss on the Oranguru, so there's no Marnie play here, so he's just looking for a way maybe to try and prevent this.
Oh, he's looking for deck out.
Yeah, but he does have the Magma base in, so can energy to the Charizard. Is there like a twin to retreat the Oranguru, and then it's just a Serena play, which is going to see it sequencing. There's a Serena for the, and a switch cut.
There we go.
And there we go. Joe will be taking his final.